Moonlit cold. That tomorrow. The rain stopped, but it seemed cloudy. Looking at the color of the lake and the direction of the high clouds, it is said that the weather will not be overwhelmed unless it comes down again, so at the gate of the Hatago, you can see a lot of footwear. Hey, I'm sorry if anyone is here. A man stood there. Staying at the hotel. When the maid of the inn came out, the man who stood in the dirt floor had a striped, and was holding down the front brim of the hat, so he couldn't understand his face. Yeah, I'm not staying. I'd like to ask the guests here for a moment, but I wonder if it was yesterday. When that dasha came down, a ronin wearing a hood, and a smart woman I'm going to come to my house here. Yes, I'm staying. Don't give this to the woman. I picked it up in front of Hashiriai's tea house yesterday, and I thought it was dropped by you, so I brought it up. Don't forget. From the bosom, take out a tag with a strange pattern, hand it to the maid. But that's the next thing, and it's the next thing that matters. By the way, the man who delivered this tag suffered the gratitude that he flew. Thank you very much for your life. I'm sorry, and thank you so much. Then, let's call you a little. Oops. I can't meet you, I'm waiting for my companion outside, so I asked only for what I've just done. Hirari went home. Customer, I'm sorry. The maid immediately took the tag, and looked into the guest room in the back. In one of the two rooms, Toya Sunbei, perhaps because he was a hangover, put a bluish face on his pillow, and slept soundly even though it was about noon. Oh, are you still good night? No. Atsuna's voice came from the other side of the partition. Atsuna was completely up to the morning makeup, and the clothes were well made. Your companion sleeps very well. Oh, don't you have breakfast? Please leave it alone. I just suffered from a chronic illness last night. Well, if you sleep well until the evening, you will feel better, so don't worry. Yes. Then the customer. I just saw a traveling person down, and told me to hand it over. The maid added the message as told by the striped man. I put a beautifully patterned tag in front of Atsuna. Well, did anyone deliver this? Atsuna gazed at the tatami mat. One of them is an unmistakable piece of Japanese Dutch karuta. Speaking of picking up near Hashiriai, the Maiko who sent them were playing at that tea house, so one of them might have been scattered in the traffic. It's no wonder, but I went through this one card. The eyesight of the man who delivered it to me is somehow amazing. However, according to the maid's message, the man does not seem to have any malicious intent. No, far from being malicious, he was thankful for something behind the scenes. Then, do you have any more needs? When the maid stood up, Atsuna asked. That. I hear something strange, but is there a Kamuso temple around here? Kamuso temple? I don't know well. Then, last night, when it was raining, it seemed that there was an occasional choppy sound, but where was that blowing? If you say one section, is that shakuhachi? Well, do you have any idea of something similar? By the way, from this time on, it seems that someone is occasionally blowing at Shigurito at the foot of the mountain in Seiki. Shigurito at the foot of the Seiki? Oh yeah, thank you. Atsuna silently closed her eyes after the maid stood up. Let's hear the distant sound of that passage, which you heard all the time in the rain last night, to the bottom of your ears again. Yum yu yu yu. Suddenly, Sunbei on the bed moved. Immediately, Atsuna stood up and listened to his pale sleeping face and sigh, with his back stuck to the wall. Shigurito. It's a name that somehow fascinates me, a name that carries my lonely compassion. Even if it wasn't, Atsuna's heart was heading towards it. Anyway, I want to take a glimpse of it, just with my voice or just my profile. Then, I gently escaped from the inn. At that time, Toya was still asleep. Atsuna suddenly wondered about her feelings while walking to the Myojin of Seiki. Oh, what's wrong with me? However, I don't feel like turning back. Something's wrong. I wonder if Atsuna's fire has turned around. Until now, I've been messing around with a man, and I can't think of him at all, playing a lot with women, and playing with geisha and men. I didn't feel like I was directed by a geisha, but, strange, this time, I can't forget that passage. I wonder if it was a devil. Clearly conscious of the suspicion of her spirit. Only her legs and heart are attracted to those who are attracted to Gun-gun. To Shigarito at that time. However, there are many good people in the world. There are also many Socho styles. The sound of sneaking into the pillow of the inn in the middle of the night last night is not necessarily the same as that Kamuso, and there are many Kamuso in the world. But it was a very similar tone. That tone I heard on the second floor of the River Chief, that was flowing along the banks of the Rikkei River. It's a really soothing tune, and the song is certainly the Socho-style mountain staggered bird. Oh, what's wrong, this, Atsuna-san? Even if I scold my breasts, one day Atsuna's heart thinks like that person. That night, the samurai Awa, who was in the tatami room next to Kawacho, went out to the garden with some sneaky swords, and Atsuna immediately looked down from the second floor without seeing it, and the voice of the sword immediately screamed under the moon. It was. And one person is in danger. When I was surprised, the Kamuso stood like a white egret and pointed the shakuhachi at the Awa samurai, who was on the other side the sharpness of the Awa samurai's sword. Atsuna, who was watching, took a small plate of the set and threw it a couple of times. However, Atsuna later regretted it. That was superfluous. At that time, the shakuhachi held by the Kamuso was shining with sufficient confidence and sharpened arms, so that even an amateur could see it. Feeling like he had done something he didn't do, Atsuna wasn't like a Yoshia, and at that time he was blamed for shame. Then, while bathing in the moon for a while and staring at the person, who is talking secretly from the upper hand column, Atsuna is horrified to the bones of the dream, and the unfamiliar boundary. I was obsessed with the chills of love. Atsuna doesn't think that love is a sarcasm. He went into his own heart. I caught a cold on a moonlit night. It was Atsuna's feeling that he was in love with the world, and not in love with him. The cold on the moonlit night became heavier. From that point on, there was a night when I went up to the tea house on the banks of the Rikkei River twice and waited for the lord of the section, but at last I couldn't see the shakuhachi, or even its shadow. The cost of 700 ryo in Kyo and Fushimi must have been gorgeous, but the cold that caught on a moonlit night is still in the heart of Atsuna. I accidentally came to a strange place. Atsuna suddenly noticed and stopped, as if his eyes had been wiped. The high stone steps of Myojin and Seiki have a thin memory that turned to the left when viewed on his right hand. The road is sloping up someday, and in the thick green bamboo grove, there is a voice of water steadily declining. I wonder if it's around here? I wish I could hear last night's passage at this time. When I was looking around the two roads, a woman was crying because of the dark cypress that went up a little. She is leaning against a cypress and crying. The sky through the trees is dull like silver smoke, and the mountains are surrounded by dark green of fir, pine and weeds. The woman who was crying with a shark was wearing a well-shaped kajuri kimono. Taking off the sleeves of her crying face and wandering down the forest path for a couple of minutes, the woman fluffed and squeezed red, as if she was possessed by a mononoke. I threw it at a tree branch. Atsuna ran crazy. She was taken by the vines and she fell down once or twice, but in time for the danger. A woman who throws an iron on her treetop and tries to squeeze her neck in a lonely forest. From behind her, she hugged her tightly. I don't do rare things. I don't do rare things. Atsuna squeezed her voice and sat down in the bamboo with her hugging her daughter, Eiji Kajuri. Immediately, her hugged daughter cried aloud. Whether she cried or cried, she groaned so that she wouldn't run out of tears. Eventually, when her voice was heard, it shook her back and became a painful sob. Well, it was a dangerous place. Atsuna was relieved to reconsider her daughter's appearance. I was surprised. Looking at it, it seems that you are still young, but what happened to you? If you can talk, please talk. No, there's nothing wrong with it. Please keep me crying, the daughter says faintly. Well, then you can't talk to people. I'm sorry, I've lost your kindness. Then, let's not ask too deeply. There are chests that no one can tell, let alone root digging and leaf digging in such cases. But hey, you-san, I'm a young person, but I can't be obsessed with the god of death in the forest among the flowers that bloom and don't bloom with each other. Oh, thank you. Once you know it, it's an impossible order, but let's get rid of it and go home early. Oh, I'm sorry. She put her gentle hand around her solo and her shoulders, peeking into the face of her daughter, who was lying down with her hair rooted. Atsuna was surprised for the first time at that time. She is Okome that I have seen in Kawacho. She was surprised, and she was surrounded by strange suspicions, and at the tip of her, she broke through the shadowy air and heard a sudden voice behind her. My husband. Okome was here. I'm here. Well, was it? 4 or 5 people gathered between the trees. Otsu Painter, Honsai Muroi and his servants in Oiwake Shuku. Oh, you were trying to get rid of it. It's a stupid guy. It's a stupid guy, said Honsai, who was sitting down from a tree branch, removing the iron and annoyingly. I came in front of Komasasa. Thank you very much for your help. Thank you very much. The guy who takes care of me, actually, I've been playing with relatives in Osaka for a while, but in the meantime, I had a chronic illness, and I spit blood, and since then I've been rushed and mad, and I'm a half madman. Even today, I suddenly slipped out of sorori, so I can't see much, so I make a noise. That's why I don't have any words of thanks anymore. With excuses and gratitude, Honsai and his servants tricked Okome into crying and took him. Atsuna muttered, perhaps, after seeing them descend from the narrow path of the forest into the bamboo grove. Such delicate and pitiful, not only did she suffer from illness, but she might have caught a moonlit night cold somewhere? At that time it was a pitiful and lonely shakuhachi investigation that resembled the roaring sound of a cormorant, shook low in the silence of the forest, and was heard out of nowhere. When I listened to her with a sigh of ears, the tone was the unmistakable Socho style, and the charade was the last mountain chidori. Atsuna's love, Okome's blood, and the souls of the 2 women seemed to be entwined with the shakuhachi's fine sounds, like a throat.